Hello and welcome to Conversations. I'm your host, Robin Torres. Conversations has many favorite people in the Kansas City metropolitan area, so we decided that every once in a while we would highlight some of our favorite people. And today's favorite person is James White, former Assistant Superintendent for the Kansas City, Kansas Public School. Mr. White has a rich history here in Kansas City, Kansas, and surprisingly, a history very rich in another part of the country. And we'll get to that in our conversation. Thank you, Mr. White, for being with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, good. Let's talk about this rich history in the other part of the country. We're talking about where you came from.
Well, I don't know how rich the history is, but I grew up in East Texas. I was born and raised in Texas. Shelby County, a little small town, Center, Texas. I graduated from high school there, which was a rural community, segregated high school. Of course, keep in mind, this is back in the 60s. After graduating from high school, which I had this huge high school class, total number of 16 students in my high school class. Anyway, after graduation, I went to college. I went to school in a larger city in Texas, in East Texas, Tyler, Texas, known as the Rose Capital of the world.
Okay.
I attended Butler College, earned an AA degree there, and then I moved over to Texas College, which is a four-year school where I earned my bachelor's degree in education. I moved from Texas to Kansas City in the late 70s.
Let me go back for a second.
Okay.
Did you come from a big family?
Yes. I grew up with three sisters. I'm the oldest of three sisters. After I entered my adulthood years, I discovered that I have an extended family, which consists of another sister and a brother, which my brother lives in Plano, Texas, which is suburbs of Dallas, and my sister lives in Beaumont, Texas. Now my brother and I have become very close, and of course my sisters I grew up with, we are all naturally very close. In fact, every Thanksgiving we have a big family dinner that rotates every year from one of our homes to the other. So it's really exciting.
It must be something to look forward to every Thanksgiving.
Oh yeah, we absolutely do. In fact, it was my turn this previous Thanksgiving to host. And of course, you know, I did all the cooking.
Right, of course.
And they all came here. Now, keep in mind, they all live in Texas, but they all were worried about the weather. You know, coming to Kansas City during Thanksgiving, will we be able to get back home? Of course, we had great weather and there was no problem.
What's your specialty? Cooking.
No, I was just kidding about the cooking.
You don't cook?
Well, I do cook a few items. I like breakfast foods, and I do fix a pretty good banana pudding.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I remember that banana pudding recipe, and we'll get to that. I do remember that. So coming up to Kansas City, what was the reason for that?
Well, when I graduated from Texas College in Tyler, I was, and I had my bachelor's degree. I was certified in elementary education. There was a personnel director from Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools by the name of Dave Crockett. Dave Crockett would recruit on the college campus there in Texas every year. In fact, I met him my sophomore year maybe, and my junior year, and naturally my senior year. I interviewed with him, and he indicated that he had a fifth grade position for me at White Church Elementary School in Kansas City, Kansas. Of course, I knew nothing about White Church, or I really didn't know anything about Kansas City, Kansas. So I kind of packed up all my little belongings, which wasn't that much, and I moved to Kansas City.
Okay.
Kansas City, Kansas, and I started working at White Church Elementary School in August of 1970.
Okay. So you met lots of people when you moved up here, I assume. Teachers that were in the school.
Oh yeah, there were many teachers here who were alumni of Texas College. I mean, many that I knew who were in classes ahead of me. So I didn't come to the area not knowing anyone. So that was very helpful.
I think I had a couple of those teachers at Quindaro when I attended Quindaro. I think you mentioned.
Well, yeah, there were many teachers here in the Kansas City, Kansas district that had graduated from Texas College, and I don't want to start trying to name them, but just a few. And when you say Quindaro, I think Mrs. Square is one that rings a bell. Mrs. Warrior, Mr. Garrett. I think everyone remembers Mr. Bill Garrett. And of course, I think he taught at Hawthorne. And then there's Mr. Stamps, who was at Northwest, and there was Mrs. Stamps, who was, I believe, at Northeast at that time, and I could go on and on and on. Yeah, they, as I stated, they recruited, the district here recruited from my college every year because it was basically a teacher's college.
Okay.
I'd say 90% of the students that attended there were education majors. So that's why they recruited from that school.
Were they specifically looking for African American teachers?
Yes, they were, because the school was 99.9% African American students.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to continue this conversation in just a moment. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Conversations with Mr. James White.
Every day, thousands of people are diagnosed with macular degeneration, a disabling eye disease that leads to severe vision loss. As a scientist conducting research for the American Health Assistance Foundation, I want you to know that there is hope that a cure and new treatments for macular degeneration will soon be found, but only if we can continue our groundbreaking research. Learn about my research. Call 1-800-437-2423 or visit ahaf.org for free publications on eye disease.
Hi, and welcome back to Conversations. We're here with James White, one of our favorite people. Okay, we're back. You moved up here to Kansas City, started working at White Church. How long was it before you met and, of course, married Miss Phyllis White?
Well, I was working at White Church, and I was there probably, as I remember, about 4 years. And then I was the assistant principal at Coronata, I believe, when I met my wife. So I was single here for a number of years. And in fact, I enjoyed my single life here during those years.
Okay.
There were a lot of single teachers here, and during those days, and they may still do this, but they'd have parties, house parties, and different places to go out, and it was very enjoyable, very safe, and in fact, that's how I met my wife, Phyllis.
Now, you guys have been married.
Well, we've been married just a few years. In fact, this July 29th will be 33 years.
Just a few, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
33 years. We have two adult children, and I'm glad to see them out of the house. And,
All right.
Our oldest is our daughter, Devry, and she lives in Houston, Texas. And she's been living there for a number of years. She's a graduate of University of Houston. And our son is Ian. Ian lives in Lawrence. And in fact...
Ian has a very nice name. I know you I refer to him as Ian,
Ian.
but I love Skylar.
Yeah.
I love
Well,
Skylar.
Skylar is his middle
Skylar,
name, and
right.
some people call him Skylar, and some people call him Ian. So, but
I
anyway,
love
it's the
Skylar.
same person.
Right.
Yeah. So, but Ian graduated from Washington High School. Devery graduated from Sumner Academy. So our kids went through the District 500 schools all the way through. I think Stony Point South, Arrowhead, Washington, and Sumner.
Now, what made Devery go back to Texas? You came from Texas, and she
Right,
moved to
and she
Texas.
right. Well, she after she graduated from Sumner, she had a scholarship to University of Prairie View, which is just outside of Houston. Well, it's in the city of Prairie View. And she went there for a year or maybe 2 years, and then she decided to transfer over to the University of Houston. Well, no, that's not right. She came back here
Okay.
after her tenure at the University of Prairie View, and she attended Kansas City, Kansas Community College and graduated from Kansas City, Kansas Community College, and then she went to the University of Houston and graduated from there with a bachelor's degree.
And she's been there ever since.
And she's been there ever since.
Not coming back.
She's not coming back.
Okay.
In fact, she says that she's not ever coming back during the winter months.
Okay.
She does not like cold weather.
Wow.
And, you know, Houston pretty much is warm year-round. Of course, this year they've had some cold weather.
Okay.
Of course, we've had cold weather all over the country this year. So, but no, she loves Houston. And I like Houston, too, to visit.
Right.
I don't think I'd like to live there. So.
Okay. Well, from White Church to Coronado, then you went to, was it Central Middle?
Well, there's another little pause in there between White Church and Coronado. Back in those days, the Kansas City, Kansas School District had a program called Career Education. And Career Education was a program that was run by a man by the name of Dr. Bertram Carruthers Sr. And that program provided resources for teachers in classrooms and kids about careers and about jobs and so forth. So I was a coordinator in that program for 2 years. And then I went to Coronado as an assistant principal. And I was at Coronado for 9 years. And then I was transferred to Central Middle School as an assistant principal. And I was there about a year and a half, maybe. I was promoted to principal of Hawthorne Elementary School during the fall, sometime before Thanksgiving of that year. So I was only at Central then, I'd say a year and a half or so. And then when I went to Hawthorne, I was there 10 years.
And that's where we met.
As principal.
That's where we met.
That's
We've
where
been
we met.
friends.
You were kind enough to come in and run the school for me.
Thank you very much. I don't know about that, but that was fun. That was probably the most fun I had had in my employment years ever, because there were so many personalities, teachers, the students, so much fun. I think it was just fun. What was your most memorable experience there at Hawthorne? Because after Hawthorne, you went to central office as the assistant superintendent. So, what's your most memorable experience at Hawthorne?
You know, there were many excited days there at Hawthorne. I truly enjoyed I enjoyed all of my positions in the district. You know, I cannot say anything negative about any position I've had, and I've had a number of positions. But I would have to say meeting the youngest son of Dr. Martin Luther King, who came to Hawthorne. And he came there as part of a program that I had put together, we had put together there at Hawthorne, to honor or recognize Dr. King's birthday. And Dexter Scott King, that's his name, he came and he was our guest speaker. And the little small school was so filled just packed with parents and kids. And as you remember, I always enjoyed having community people in the school, not just parents, but community people, even those who may not even had kids, or their kids are grown and adults and off and gone, but I would invite them over to the school for just certain activities. So when Dexter King came for that celebration, I think that's one of the highlights. I really enjoy that. But there are also many others that involve different students, and I won't get into the names. Some of them I can remember very clearly. They were just outstanding. We had an outstanding group of staff people there. It was just a great time.
I agree. The staff was outstanding. We lost one of them that was very dear, I think, to both of us.
Absolutely.
Deary.
That's right. She was an outstanding teacher. Yeah. And we had many outstanding
many
teachers
outstanding
there.
teachers,
So,
yes, we did.
yeah. But what was really, another thing was unique about that, going to Hawthorne, Dr. Bertram Carruthers, who had, I think, recently retired from the Kansas City, Kansas School District when I went there.
Okay.
And he had been the principal there back during the 60s.
You have a very special story about was it Dr. Bertram Carruthers?
Dr. Bertram Carruthers Sr.
Okay,
Right.
and we're going to get to that story when we come back from break. We'll be right back with James White.
Our fugitive has been on the run for 90 minutes. Average foot speed over uneven terrain, barring any injuries, is 4 miles per hour. What I need from each and every one of you is a full target search of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, and dog house in that area. Your fugitive has just cashed in his 401k plan, and all he had to do was roll it over.
Learn about rollovers and protecting your financial future, and choose to save.
You can't mess with a big dog.
Hi, and welcome back to Conversations. We're going to finish our conversation here with James White, one of our favorite people. Thanks for staying here with us. Okay, before we left for break, we had started the conversation about Dr. Bertram Carruthers Sr. Tell us why he is so special and significant in your life.
Well, he was certainly that special and very important in my life, but he was also special and important in a lot of people's lives here in the Kansas City area. Dr. Bert, as we refer to him, when he retired from the school district, he was the assistant to the superintendent for the Kansas City, Kansas School District. But he had served as a principal in a number of schools, but the one that was most notable to me, of course, was Hawthorne. And he had been the principal there back during most of the 60s, I believe. But if you met Dr. Carruthers just one time, you would never forget him. He always had something positive to say whenever he met a person. He was never negative. He was also always educating people. A lot of the teachers in the district took classes from him because he taught some classes for K-State where teachers could earn their graduate degrees or earn credited hours towards certification. So he met a lot of people. But Dr. Bert, he just had a way about him. You just had to meet him. When I started working for him, see, I was working directly for him in this career education program. And he and I traveled together. I mean, we from mostly in the state of Kansas and Missouri, University of Missouri, Columbia, all over Kansas, Independence, Kansas. I remember that trip clearly. So we got to visit a lot. And he probably taught me more in those 2 years that I worked for him than I learned in all of my college days, including my graduate work at the University of Kansas. Dr. Burt just had a way of doing that. You know, he had something that you don't hear much about anymore, common sense, you know. And whenever he would observe you doing something or saying something that was not quite appropriate, or perhaps there was a better way to do that, he would tell you. But he would do it in such a manner that you were not embarrassed, and that you learned a lot from that. And by working with him every day, I learned every day. And sometimes on weekends, he would come pick me up and say, let's go to lunch. And we'd go out somewhere in Missouri, eat and just enjoy visiting and chatting. And it was just a real experience. I miss him to the day. Okay. I mean, I really do.
Well, it's evident he had a profound
yeah.
impact on your life, because
Yeah.
you were a great leader,
Yeah.
mentor and everything. So,
well, you know, one other story about him. When I was assigned to work for him, and I never worked for him, he didn't look at it that way. You work with him. But I knew I was working for him,
right.
see, and I
That's
didn't forget that. But let me tell you, the first thing he said was, do you have your master's degree? And I said, no. He said, where are you going to get it? I go, oh, really? Yeah. So if you're going to work for me, you're going back to school, and you're going to get your master's degree. And somehow we talked about that, and I did. I enrolled in KU, and I think 2 years later, because I had to go part-time, and I did get my master's from KU.
how important is mentoring today? Because it sounds like he did have a great impact on your life, and continuing, of course, your rise to become assistant superintendent yourself in the school district.
Well, I think mentoring is exceptionally important. You know, a lot of young people can function okay, and they do all right. Some just need that extra help, or that extra push. And men like Dr. Carruthers could do that in such a manner that it was just unbelievable. I mean, it was just really unbelievable.
Oh, well, you are a great mentor to me. I just wanted to tell you that.
Oh, well, thank you.
I really look up to you. And now Hawthorne Elementary School has been renamed to the Carruthers Elementary School.
Right. It was named Bertram Carruthers Senior Elementary School. And I want to say that was done about 94, maybe 95. I don't remember the exact date. But it had to be between 93 and 95.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not 93, 95. 2003, 2005, somewhere in there. That's when that was done, because I was part of that committee that worked with that program. And the school board has a policy about naming schools, buildings, libraries, gyms, or what have you. There's a policy. You just can't say, well, I'm going to put a name up on this building. So we went through that procedure and followed that policy. But the reason it came up was when I was the principal there was a woman who had children at Hawthorne. And I don't think she would mind me calling her name, because she's the one that got it started. Her name is Yvonne Jones. She thought that the school would be better served, or would serve the community better, if it were named after someone that the community knew. And everyone in that community knew Dr. Carruthers. And so I started a little campaign, and I said, how many of you know who Hawthorne is? I'm talking to adults. Well, I have to tell you, very few, if any, knew who Hawthorne, why the school was named after Hawthorne. And by the way, that's Nathaniel Hawthorne. Well, they didn't know who that was. Then I asked, how many of you know who Dr. Bertram Carruthers is, Senior? Everyone knew that. So that was a good indicator there that maybe it should be changed. And since Dr. Carruthers was such an outstanding person in the Kansas City community, that would be appropriate.
Okay.
So we went to the superintendent, who at that time was Dr. Ray Daniels, and he thought it was a great idea. The school board approved it.
And there.
And on the night that the school board met and approved the changing of the name from Hawthorne Elementary to Dr. Bertram Carruthers Senior Elementary, Dr. Carruthers was in the hospital. And when the board approved that, I immediately left the meeting and went and called him and told him that Hawthorne Building School now is now named Dr. Bertram Carruthers Senior Elementary. And he thanked me. And then the next day, naturally, I went by his room at the hospital and visited with him about that. And he was excited about that and very pleased. But keep in mind, at that time, he was pretty sick. He really was. So that's how that came about. The naming of
Hawthorne.
changing the
Dr.
name from Hawthorne to Dr. Bertram Carruthers Senior.
Wow, that was special. We have run out of time, but I know that you have a couple of, your favorite sport, golf, and then you have your piano, your new hobby. So I am sorry we couldn't get to that, and there's so much more to talk with you about, and that's why you are one of our favorite people. Hopefully you will come back to the studio, to Kansas City, Kansas Community College, and we can follow up on another conversation.
Well, I love to come back and talk about my music, but I also like to talk about McAnany, Van Cleves, and Phillips.
That's where
the
you
next
are
time I
right
come
now.
back.
Yes,
So
yes, we
the
will.
law firm where I work now.
Okay.
So I'll
Well,
look forward to that.
Thank you for being with us today.
And thank you for having me.
Well, good. And we'll see you next time on Conversations. Have a great evening. Good.